I'm Jeanette Marcotte, and I am the personal training liaison for NSCA Québec. And today I am interviewing Melissa Boufounos, and we are talking all things growing up an athlete, navigating the nutrition education system, nutrition myths, aesthetics, performance, where they align, where they don't, and fueling for obstacle courses versus hockey. Hope you enjoy our conversation, and let us know if you have any comments or suggestions below. I am chatting today with Melissa Boufounos, who is a certified holistic nutritionist and a precision nutrition level 2 coach who helps competitive athletes simplify their fueling plans with flexible eating strategies so they can maximize their performance potential without counting calories, tracking macros, or giving up their favorite foods. Melissa was a competitive hockey player for over 20 years. And since 2013, she has competed in over 70 obstacle course races, earning 2 age group podiums and qualifying for the OCR World Championships 4 times. She has also been named one of Canada's top 100 health influencers 3 years in a row by Optimize magazine. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you some more.
Awesome. All right, so I'd love to start with just a little bit of your background stories. You started young with your love of sports and nutrition, but you didn't actually start that way in your education. You started in journalism. So what drew you eventually to holistic nutrition specifically, and then how did OCR racing get into that?
Yeah, so I've been interested in nutrition and fitness since I was really young. I mean, I had figure skates on the same year that I learned how to walk. I, played soccer as a kid, ringette, baseball, tennis. In high school, I did like rugby and hockey and just like pretty much any sport that was available. I tried it at some point. My parents were very much the mindset that, the kids should be active, and like we had a summer sport, we had a winter sport. If we didn't like it, we found a new one. So we just always had to be in a sport in the winter and in the summer. And I think, especially with hockey, because that was the sport I was like so passionate about, really wanted to do well at, was good at. I started like on my own, just researching nutrition. I don't even think Google, I think, was like around back then, but like just barely, but it was just like whatever search engine I was using. But it was mostly like the magazines. So obviously that's probably not the best source of, nutrition advice. And I was like a 12, 13, 14-year-old reading like the, teen health and women's health and whatever. And for a while, I used to come home from school and watch Dr. Oz every day. So also probably not the best source of information looking back now. And then same with fitness. Like I was the kid who like, I asked for like dumbbells and like workout bands and stability balls. And my parents were like, we can't buy you that. Like that sends such the wrong message. You're too young. And I was like, it's not about thin, or I don't think it was. It was just like, I knew hockey players like worked out and I wanted to work out. And so I would wake up and there was like a TV show in the morning at like 7:30. And it was like in the 2000s, but it looked like it was the 80s. And it was like, just like this women's like step class that you could like follow, and they had little weights and they would do like these like steps across and steps forwards. And I was just like doing it in my bedroom before school. And it was totally ridiculous. And again, totally not what a hockey player should be, like not the right type of training. But anyway, so in high school, I, kept working out. I was like the only girl interested in weights, and like I'd go to the gym and be the only girl in the weight section. In gym class, I remember like once our teacher was like, oh, we have a choice for like sports to play for the next 2 weeks. Like, do you want to do soccer or like floor hockey, or like we can do a dance, like 2 weeks of dance? And everyone was like, ooh, let's do dance. And I was like, oh, like I hate dance. Like, can I play a real sport? Like, no offense to dancers, but I was just like, I want to play sports. And so the boys were playing floor hockey. And I was like, can I just like go play in the boys class? And they were like, I don't know, like that's not like heard of. But the boy gym teacher and our gym teacher talked to each other, and they agreed that I could go join their class and like participate. And so yeah, I was just always the person who wanted to like work out and be physical. And so in high school, I was interested in like nutrition and training. And I wanted a career in that, but my parents were like, you have straight A's, like you're too smart to be a personal trainer. You're too smart to be a nutritionist. So they kind of like pushed me away from that, which is why I ended up going to school for journalism, because I liked writing, I liked research, but then I also figured, well, I could go in the journalism route and like talk about sports all day. And so that's what I tried, didn't love it. And eventually my mom kind of realized like, no, you know, your passion was always nutrition. Like even as you're writing, like all you're writing about is nutrition, like go back to school. So I did. At that point in my life, I didn't want to go back to university for like a 4-year or longer degree. So that's why I went to the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. I did their advanced diploma course. So it was a 1-year program full-time versus the 2-year program. And that's how I became a certified holistic nutritionist.
That's awesome. I love this. Like, I'm imagining you as a child just being like advocating for yourself so strongly. And I love it so much because I would never have done it.
You know, it's funny because as a kid, I was definitely more of a loudmouth than I am now. Like now I don't like advocate for myself that much. Like it's bad. Like my boyfriend always gets so mad at me. He's like, oh, like you come home and you're like, this is what I want, but like that's not what you said you wanted to those people or whatever. But as a kid, especially when it was like sports, like I was so passionate about that. And like, you know, it's something that I was like, I'm not hurting anyone's feelings by asking about playing sports, right? Like how controversial is that?
Right. Oh man, that's awesome. I love it. We had co-ed classes, so everybody did everything. So I never really had to have that problem.
Right.
But yeah, I resonate with the like, let's just do all the sports.
Right.
Why not? They're there. We might as well do them all. Yeah. Oh, so that's super interesting. That you like started your education from like, you know, just general magazines and Dr. Oz and all these sort of like very media heavy sources. But it seems like you came through it really well with your sports focus. So I'm curious about like what went right in that. Like we have a lot of discussions about everything that goes wrong, especially with young girls in sport in terms of like perspective of nutrition and exercise. So what was it that went right that allowed you to use it in a way that was more empowering and didn't get sucked into like the diet culture stuff?
Yeah, to be honest, I probably did get sucked into diet culture a little bit. And also going to school for like holistic nutrition also kind of, you know, there's stereotypes about like holistic nutritionists, and like, you know, there's a lot of people who look at the alternative medicine as like quackery and things like that. And I'll be honest, there's some stuff I learned in school that I have since like taken a more evidence-based approach to. And there are some things that I learned that I had as like values for a while. You know, when I went to school, I remember like being scared of like so many foods. And I probably went into that program with a more or less normal diet. And then while I was in that program, like I was then like, oh my God, toxins are everywhere. I can't eat GMOs, like gotta go gluten-free and like need to do this and need to do that. And so I did kind of go down, and I wouldn't say it was like diet culture necessarily, because it wasn't from a place of weight loss. Like I've never done, well, I have done some stuff from a place of weight loss, but my mentality wasn't from a place of weight loss, but it was definitely that like elitist side of things from nutrition. And really just like I went down that rabbit hole, and it just, I don't know, like it was hard like to come out of that. Like again, it was like the organic stuff and whatever. And I think what kind of like saved me was the fact that I did want to approach it from a sports perspective, and I could see that some of the stuff I was doing was harming my performance. And so yes, there were times that I like looked at my body, and I've always been thin, but like I was like, oh, I don't have like abs, and I want like abs. And so I'm like, let me try this juice cleanse, because I learned in school that juice cleanses are great and you need to detox, and like let's do this. But then as performance suffered, it was clear to me that something wasn't right there. So once I graduated, and we had like a very brief sports nutrition course in there, but it was literally 4 classes, like 4 3-hour classes. So it was 12 hours of education from one textbook. And it was good. Like the textbook itself wasn't a holistic nutrition textbook. So that helped me kind of go like, yep, I really, really like sports nutrition. There was things I pulled from that I started to change in myself, could see how it affected performance. But then when I graduated, I was like, I really need to focus on like performance nutrition. And at the time, the precision nutrition certification was called like sport and exercise nutrition. I don't think it's called that anymore. But the way I understood the course, it was going to be like for sports performance. So that's when I took precision nutrition level 1, which doesn't have a huge emphasis on like sports nutrition, but that pulled me out of that like diet culture, elitist like mentality, gave me a lot of the evidence-based practices that I still use with clients today. And even though I still call myself a certified holistic nutritionist, because it is a designation and it allows me to do more than I could as just a like health coach. I don't use most of the education from that. And what I use is mostly what I learned from precision nutrition, doing level 1, doing level 2, and then just continuing on my own. Like I bought like university style textbooks specific to sports nutrition, like, $100, $200 textbooks that I also do research on my own and try to implement things for myself and then realize what works and then kind of use that with my athletes.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like that's a common experience, that like where you start learning and then you go a little too far into the weeds and then something either pulls you out or it doesn't. So yeah, that's cool that it was that extra add-on piece. And I also salute you for reading those textbooks on your own, because that's intense. I read a lot, but
finished them.
They're not really meant to be read cover to cover, though. Let's be fair. They're reference sources.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Out of curiosity, just what made you choose the holistic nutrition program over a different type of nutrition? Was that just what was available?
Yeah, I think, I had done some research at the time and I didn't like the sound of being a registered dietitian. One, the schooling was very long. And at that point I was already like 23. So I was like, I'm not going back to school for like 6 or 7 years and being 30 when I graduate. But part of it was like, I had done some research and didn't love that the registered dietitian side of things. And I know that's starting to change, but still hasn't completely. And there are dietitians who've like broken the mold of what they're taught in school. But a lot of what was taught in schools at the time, and from what I researched, it was very much like after you're sick. It wasn't the preventative model. It's, once you're sick, you go to a hospital, a dietitian will work with you. And very much it's heavily regulated. So it's like, here's the Canada food guide, here's the US food guide, this is how you have to eat. And I didn't like that approach. And so as I kind of researched nutrition and some things that I knew, like I intuitively kind of knew that like there's more to nutrition than that. And so there was a lot of draw to the holistic side of things. And there's still a lot of things in the holistic side of things that I agree with, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't completely evidence-based that still gets pushed hard that I don't agree with. And so when I compared the two and like I read blogs of people who had done the RD course and people who had done Canadian School of Natural Nutrition course, and I just felt like that was going to be more along the lines of what I wanted. And there were some courses, like there was like a body, mind, spirit course that I just like rolled my eyes at, was like, this is crazy. Like, this isn't what I like want to learn. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff in the dietitian university program that like, same thing, like I have no interest in. I don't want to work in a hospital setting or anything like that. But there are some things that I now have to learn for myself because, the precision nutrition didn't cover it. The holistic nutrition course didn't cover it. So I keep taking like more specialty courses or attending webinars or things like that, the big international conferences put on that have to do with sports nutrition so that I can really hone those skills as a sports nutritionist.
That continuing education piece is essential kind of no matter where you go. Like science is still growing. So yeah. So next thought was I kind of wanted to maybe spend a little bit of time talking about, like, so you grew up an athlete and now you coach athletes. So have you seen a shift in how we approach, like, I know you've shifted over to more of a new style of a more holistic way of being healthy and performance based. Have you seen that across the board, or do you see what's improved and what still needs work?
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of improvement there because, like I said, there's a lot of registered dietitians who are taking a more holistic approach to things as well. And I follow a lot of them on Instagram, and you could tell that they don't teach their athletes like what is in the RD course necessarily. And there's the focus on like stress and lifestyle and sleep and things like that do come from more that holistic side, like looking at the whole person and all the different influences, not just nutrition. But there's still, I think there's still going to be like bad practitioners in any, whether you're a registered dietitian, a health coach, a nutritionist, who, you go to the same program as somebody and you all learn the same thing, and someone comes out with like, oh, all athletes should be keto, and someone else comes out of that education with all athletes shouldn't be keto. And it's amazing to see that you can have the same education and come out with completely polar opposite opinions, or whatever you want to call them, from what you've learned. So I think, yeah, there's still some work that needs to be done. But also I think the bigger problem is that too many people online, like, they get their information from like the media still, and influencers and magazines, or if magazines aren't cool anymore, but like the online version of that, like blogs or whatever, that aren't necessarily written by professionals. And I saw, from athletes themselves who don't necessarily, just because they have great results and maybe eat okay doesn't mean they actually know what they're talking about. And I see this frequently. And a couple of weeks ago, this came up where it's like, I know, like, I beat this drum like tirelessly every day. I show up on social media. I know what I post on a regular basis, have a Facebook group. I see other RDs posting stuff like this. And then an athlete in the OCR community, like, just shared like 10 things I know to be true about diets. And all these comments were like, wow, finally someone had some common sense to share this. Like, and I was like, what? Like, I talk about this stuff every single day. But it's amazing how, like, just whether it's algorithms or whatever, people see like an athlete and he has like 30,000 followers. I have 2,000 followers. So they see like what the athletes are saying versus the professionals. And I think that's still a big problem, especially as we see more athletes starting to come forward saying like, oh yeah, by the way, like, I've been battling an eating disorder for the last 20 years. And these are athletes who, shared on Instagram stories what they were eating in a day. You see their 6-pack and their race results, and you see the comments being like, oh, what do you eat? Oh, I want to eat like this. Oh, I want to perform like you. Oh, look, this is what they did for training today. Let me follow that. And that's not where you need to be going for your advice. Like, you need to go to actual professionals. And I think that's still an issue.
Yeah, for sure. That's sort of like the internet issue in a nutshell, is that it's very hard to tell who is a real expert. And for the layperson, that level of figuring it out is sometimes a little bit overwhelming. And yeah, then algorithms don't help.
No, and the funny thing too is, like, people just assume that if you're an elite athlete, like, you have good nutrition, like, you know what you're doing, and you don't. And I've had this conversation with people before too, where I commented something on Facebook once about there was an NHL game that went to like 6 or 7 extra overtimes, and I posted something on Facebook being like, wow, I really hope they've got like some solid nutrition in the dressing room. Like, this is like 3 hockey games in one. And I said, the announcers were talking about how they ordered pizza for the team. I'm like, that's gross. Like, they have a 20-minute intermission and they're going to eat pizza and go back on the ice. And someone commented being like, oh, you have to be an idiot if you think NHL players eat pizza. Like, they don't even drink Gatorade, even though that's the bottle. And like, I'm like, do you work for the NHL? Like, do you work with athletes? Like, you're just a guy on the internet. Like, you don't know. And I was like, I work with athletes. and I work with and have colleagues that are the nutritionists or dietitians for these teams. And I know for a fact that their nutrition's not great. And there's a lot of pro teams that like still don't work with dietitians. There's still a lot of pro athletes who don't. And, you know, in the NHL, there's a handful of teams that actually have dietitians on staff. Not everybody has them. So it's not right to think that, oh, if they're elite, like they know what they're talking about. So if they write a book, I should read it. If they have a blog, I should read it. If they say something on Instagram, I should follow it.
Yeah, that is tricky, right? Because they give that persona of the expert, and if they're succeeding, there's that. But it's like, are they succeeding because of their diet or despite their diet?
Yeah. It's a lot of genetics at play, and you can play despite your nutrition for a very long time, especially male athletes. Like they don't seem to get hit as hard. Like whereas female athletes, right? If you're under eating for a long time, you know, don't have your period, you start getting the stress fractures, like the hormonal disruptions that happen for women athletes, like really affects their performance more than male athletes. And so, yeah, male athletes can get away with eating McDonald's and pizza or under eating or whatever and still have performance. But after a while, it catches up with you, and they might have 5 or 6 amazing seasons or races or whatever. And then all of a sudden they're no longer competing and people don't understand why. And it's like, yeah, it caught up to them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one shift that I've been very happy to see as well, that we're moving away from the era where having the female triad and losing your period while you're working out is a badge of honor, or somehow you've made it. It's like now we're like recognizing that, oh, maybe that's not so good for performance.
Yeah, I was actually listening to a podcast. I don't remember the podcast, but it was a couple of months ago, and they had someone on there who works in like female physiology. And she was saying that there's a race in the UK that's actually thinking about implementing a rule that like the female athletes have to prove that they actually menstruate. Like they want to make sure that athletes are fueling themselves properly. I don't know how you would go about proving that or how that would actually work, but it's almost like, you know, that weigh-in, like you have to come and be like, yeah, I actually have a regular period. Okay, you can actually race. And if you don't, they're trying to like push out people who aren't healthy.
I have very mixed feelings about that because of like,
I know
it's just kind of like that invasive into like checking women's bodies thing, which has been around a little too long. And also tied into like, what if somebody has like PCOS and they don't have a regular period? Like, are we going to tell them they can't be an athlete?
Yeah, I don't think it's like as far as that, but I think it is just like, you know, because you might be on birth control and not get a period or something like that. But it might even be as simple as looking at certain hormones and making sure that they're where they're supposed to be. But yeah, like I said, I don't know if it can actually be implemented. It was just something this woman had posted or said on the podcast, and I was like, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is an interesting idea. And I like, kind of, part of me likes the idea of just keep raising the bar on that awareness of like, this is really important. You should be like at a certain standard of health before we allow you to continue to break yourself down.
Yeah, exactly.
So to bring this back to obstacle course racings, what would you say, like, so a lot of our audience is going to be people with a strength and training background and not so much the nutrition end of things. So what would you say is like most essential for someone like an OCR athlete who is got that endurance plus strength piece? So it's that really combined fitness aspect. What makes a nutrition program good for that type of athlete?
Yeah, and you nailed it right on the head by saying it's like endurance and strength. So, you know, you go read endurance nutrition textbooks and the information isn't completely adequate for an OCR athlete. So I've kind of, not being like a trailblazer, because like it's other people's research that I like pull stuff from and just kind of like experiment with, but there has to be that like joining of two different sides of things. Like OCR athletes are these like hybrid athletes. So whereas endurance athletes, people who strictly do like marathons or ultra marathons or triathlons, like, you know, they might be a lot thinner and not have the muscle that an OCR athlete would need. So there are a lot of recommendations in like endurance textbooks that I think, like, for example, the protein, I think the protein is too low for like strictly endurance athletes to come over to OCR. So there's some things that I've tweaked and worked with on myself and with athletes. And it is just like, they don't need as much protein as someone trying to like put on a ton of mass, because they don't want to also be heavy. They do want to be strong, but they don't necessarily want to weigh a ton. And you do need the endurance side of things, like a lot of the carbs. So, and you still need to be mindful of, healthy fats, because athletes need healthy fats. So there is like a balance there. And it's also about like cycling throughout the season, because it's not the same type of training all year round, where someone who might do strength training, like there's not, I think, as many changes throughout the season and how different their training is. Like, yes, you might change reps and sets and things like that. But like there's like a full on off season where athletes don't really do anything, or they run very little. And then there's the building phases of their season where they're running a ton of mileage, they're putting a lot of stress on their body. And so their nutrition needs to always be changing. And that's something a lot of people don't think about. They set calorie and macro goals for people, and it's like, oh, you work out X amount of hours a week, here you go. And then that athlete just thinks that's what they need to follow 24/7 all year round. Whereas from day to day, your training changes. So I teach athletes how to look at that on a daily basis. And without the calorie counting, without the macros, like just really understanding like this level of intensity requires this much carbs, this much protein, this much fat, looking at performance plates and really like the visual cues of that. Because yeah, it's a challenge to really like get into calories and macros. And if you need to calculate that for every single day of the week and trying to figure out what the burn is every single day, it's not the same, and it can get complicated, and it doesn't need to be.
Right. So you've touched a little bit already on the next piece that I wanted to get into, was that a lot of people think that if you're going to be even a little bit competitive, you really got to level up and be like counting everything and weighing everything and like just like math your food. So what is it about your system that makes it more flexible and doable for these athletes?
Yeah, I think, there's a time and a place for counting and things like that. But honestly, like it's far and few between. It's been probably 5 years since I've even tracked or measured a food. And, I've gotten age group podiums in that time. Like people would look at my body type and go, oh, like you're skinny. Like I want to look like you. Like I don't track or weigh or anything like that. And same with like my partner, like, he's very active. He has like a construction job. So completely different from me. I'm sedentary all day. So my needs totally different than his. He's on a construction site all day. He comes home with like 20,000 steps, then goes and work out. He's 6'4", but he's also like super lean, and he eats literally the equivalent of like like 3 sedentary adults. And people see what he puts away and they're just like, that's unbelievable. Like, how do you have a 6-pack and you're this tall? And it's like, they think he weighs and tracks and like, no, we don't weigh, measure, track anything. It's just about like, again, understanding what your body needs. I'm very active today. Well, I'm going to need more carbs. I'm sedentary most of the day. Yes, I still need carbs. I'm not going carb free, but what the amount of carbs I'm putting on my plate versus what he's putting on his plate, totally different. Like it's like a 1 to 6 difference between, what's going on our plate. So it's like teaching athletes to look at it that way. And yeah, I think counting, like, again, there's some athletes who do better with it. And I have one athlete right now who just like, she really likes it. She likes to eat the same meal for breakfast and lunch every day for a couple weeks. And then she rotates it out, because for her, that is easier. It's just like, it's done. It's whatever. I know what it is. And I know I'm getting enough food. But there's a lot of athletes I work with who, yeah, everything about counting is like stressful, and it creates like some disordered eating habits, and it creates a lot of restriction that doesn't need to be there. And so once they start to understand how to fuel themselves without it, because also like you can't rely on it 24/7. You want to go out to eat, you want to go to a restaurant, you go to a party, you can't use those numbers. Do you know how to eat? And so yes, athletes can track if they want to, but if they don't understand why they're making those choices outside of the numbers, I don't think that's doing them any service. So it's important to me that they learn how to make those choices for themselves without some numbers telling them to do some math. And it doesn't need to be complicated. And the fact that we've had over 70 podiums from the athletes we work with without counting and tracking macros and things like that, the proof is in the pudding, no pun intended.
Yes. And a delicious pudding it is.
Yeah.
No, I definitely appreciate that. I hate tracking things, so I'm always on board with not tracking.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that empowering piece to let them, teach them to make their own decisions, to be able to like look at what's available and problem solve it, is such a valuable skill that carries through lifelong, really, like far beyond the athletics.
Yeah, because I see all the time, like someone will post on Facebook like, oh, I need to get back on track with my nutrition, so I'm going to count calories for a week or two. But it's like, the reason why you're off track with your nutrition is because you don't know how to make choices. Like, there shouldn't be an on or an off. You shouldn't have to count calories and track macros to understand what to put on your plate. Like, those numbers shouldn't dictate to you, oh, that's how much protein I need. Like, you should be able to open your fridge or go somewhere and be like, oh yeah, like, you know, this is what a normal size portion of protein looks like. And how much did I work out today? Like, do I need this many carbs or this many carbs? Or, you know, I didn't work out today, but I want that many carbs, and it's okay to have them. And that's the other thing too. And with the calories, so I have an athlete who still is counting calories, kind of. She likes seeing those numbers. And so she messaged me the other day and said, like, okay, so on my workout days, like, I'm not as hungry, but my numbers say I have to eat this much. But then the next day, the numbers are lower because it's an off day, but now I'm starving. And I'm like, that's why I hate counting calories and macros. Like, you think you have to force yourself to overeat, and then the day that you're starving, you're stopping eating. Like, this makes no sense. So yes, on your training days, your digestion might be a little wonky. Like, blood flow kind of gets shunted away from digestion when you're training. So you might not be hungry. Yes, I encourage them to eat enough and not under eat on their training days. And we work on strategies like soups and smoothies to get nutrition in. But if you physically can't get that food in and the next day you're starving, you need to eat. And if you're looking at your rest day calories and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be eating today, and you sit there all day starving, like, what good is that going to do you? So really moving them away from that mentality and just like, fuel intuitively. If you're hungry, eat. Here's how to make those decisions. And if you're not hungry, stop eating.
Sounds simple, but it sometimes isn't.
Yeah.
So I do want to respect your time. I have a couple more questions, but are you okay with it?
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. So I know that you have recently expanded back into the realm of hockey and your other power sports with your new coaching program. So I'm a little curious about the parallels and the differences between OCR and hockey. Like, do you find the two marry well, or is it a big switch back?
Yeah, it's not a huge switch. I mean, there's going to be less carbs, I guess, in a hockey player's diet. And the timing is a bit different too, because, you know, hockey players, it's because it's a stop and go sport. Like, they're on the bench a lot. Like, even though you have a 60-minute game, you're not doing 60 minutes of effort. So fueling in the middle of a game is a lot different than like going for a 5-hour run and needing to figure out how to fuel for that and the digestive upsets and things like that. But yes, there are a lot of parallels. You know, the protein still looks the same. The types of foods we're looking for still look very similar. You know, putting things on performance plates and matching that to your training intensity still looks very much the same. It's just being able to manipulate those portion sizes does look a little bit different. And for hockey players, especially looking to put on size, they're probably eating more protein and just a little bit less carbohydrates is probably the biggest difference between the two.
Cool. You have also taken on a part-time role with a local sports rehab clinic, and I would love to hear just a little bit more about what your role is there. I love the integrative aspect of like the full holistic health where all of the different types of practitioners can support each other. So I'd love to know kind of what you get to do there and how like nutrition plays into recovery just a little.
Yeah, so I only just started yesterday. Technically, it was like my first day. It's been a conversation I've been having with that owner for a long time now, but obviously with the pandemic and clinics being closed and open and closed and open, we just never like really had me start. So yeah, I mean, it's a multidisciplinary clinic. It is more like athletic therapy and rehab. So they have athletic therapists and massage therapists, but the owner does also, he comes from an extensive hockey background, working with like under 17, like Team Canada and like Paralympics. And so he also has people like sports psychology people that are at that clinic, but not everybody's there all the time. It just depends on their client load. So for me, it's not that I'm necessarily going to support the injury side of things, and I absolutely can, but that might only be like a one-off consultation. It's just more that like, because he sees so many athletes and like he knows their nutrition's not up to par, it's more like, all right, so like, yes, you're injured, but also like, let's talk about your nutrition. We have a nutritionist on site, and that clinic partners up with a lot of the hockey organizations in our local community. So I think it's just a really great opportunity for me as well to have like an in with that community now that I am trying to work with hockey players more. So I'm excited. I mean, I do have an athlete booked in already for next week, but it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I'm there 1 day a week. And it's also like, I offer these services online. So anybody who finds me online could easily work with me online and doesn't have to come to the clinic. But there are benefits to working with someone in person. There's a lot of people who don't necessarily want to do the online side of things. And since they're already coming to the clinic and trust the clinic and trust the people that are there, having that referral is also going to help.
Yeah, so just really having everything under one roof and making it easy for the clients to have everything they need without having to go hunt it down.
Exactly.
That's great. That's awesome. All right. I have a couple of like bonus round questions that are just really quick, just for a little bit about you. So know that you are currently pregnant. So I would love to know, what is the most interesting nutrition or athletic related fact that you have learned since becoming pregnant that you were like, holy crap, I did not know that before?
That, you know what? I don't know, because I've been researching pregnancy nutrition since I was like 17. Like, it's just, again, something that always interested me. So I've had pregnancy books forever. So I don't know that there's anything I've like learned recently. I guess for me, the biggest thing is like the fatigue. Like, I had in my head, like, oh, like I bought a program that's like specifically tailored to pregnant athletes. And I was so excited to start doing it. And my body's like, how about no? Like, you're not doing anything. And so I'm almost to 12 weeks and I've barely left my couch for 12 weeks. Like, wow. It's just, I am so exhausted. And even something like this, like even just physically talking for half an hour, it's like, I'll go need a nap for like an hour. My brain's like, I'm good. Like, you need to rest. And so it's definitely more exhausting. And like, you hear people talk about it being tiring, but I'm like, how tiring can it be? And it's exhausting. And I know everyone's experience is different. And I also wonder if my like post-concussion syndrome history is part of what's affecting me, because it's my brain. It's like the physical, like mental fatigue that I'm experiencing a lot. Like, I had so much brain fatigue the first 7 weeks. I didn't even open my computer. Like, I was just like staring at the wall, like, does my brain work anymore? Like, it's just like, it was so interesting to me. And so like my nutrition's still been on point. But yes, like food aversions, totally a real thing. It's been interesting to see those changes of like, this week my body wants protein and next week my body doesn't want protein, and like honoring that. And I think that's also difficult too, because not from a diet mentality or like diet culture mentality, I'm not worried about the weight gain, but from a performance perspective and things like that, I'm like, I haven't eaten protein in 3 days, but like, that's just not what my body wants. Or like, I couldn't eat vegetables for a couple of days, but I ate a lot of fruit. So I was like, oh, at least I'm getting some color in. But just knowing the nutrients I need, sometimes I'm like, oh man, like diet was not on point today, but like all I can eat is toast. Like, It is what it is. But it is just interesting. It is just a very interesting experience.
Really takes your intuitive eating to a whole new level, really.
Yep. Like my breakfast this morning, I did have toast and strawberries, and then ate 2 handfuls of sour candies after, like those little sour buddies, like because that helps the nausea. And I was like, candy for breakfast? All right. Like, it is what it is. I'm getting food into me, I guess.
Yeah, here we go.
Yep.
Oh, all right. If you could give an OCR newbie, someone who's doing their very first course, one piece of advice, what would it be?
For the first race, I would just say have fun. I mean, you don't need to focus on nutrition really, because I think a newbie is not taking on a 24-hour race or anything like that. Like they're going to start with a 5K. And I think it's just, yeah, you just need to have fun. Like, you know, don't wear any white clothes that you don't want to never come clean again. You know, like take a waterproof camera, have fun, do it with some friends. But also like, you know, be careful who you follow online because it can quickly, you know, one, you're going to get addicted, like you're going to do one and you're going to do more. So once you sign up for one, you probably will be stuck for life and you will become interested in racing more. So just be mindful of who you follow online. And if you do want to get serious about it, just follow the right coaches and the right trainers, because it is different style training and different eating and things like that.
Do you have a favorite obstacle?
I love monkey bars. I always have. I was so awesome at monkey bars as a kid. Actually, funny but not funny story. My first concussion ever was like falling off monkey bars at like 5. But like I have nieces and nephews who at like 8 or 9 years old can't get across monkey bars. And like at 4 years old, I was doing like, you know, skipping a whole like bar and like jumping from the platform to monkey bars. So like I've always just loved monkey bars and I would hang upside down on them and do weird things and give my parents heart failure. But yeah, I went to like jump from the platform to like the 3rd bar because I think there was a boy I was showing off for at like 4 years old, of course. And I was like, oh, look, I can jump to the 1st monkey bar, easy. I can jump to the 2nd monkey bar, easy. And I went to jump to the 3rd monkey bar and like missed and my head like smacked the platform. So I'm like pretty sure that was like my first concussion. But yeah, I love monkey bars and a lot of the different races do like innovative things with monkey bars. Like they're not just straight monkey bars. Like some of them go, you know, up and down and, you know, whatever, or some of them will have ring attachments and things like that. But anything that's like monkey bar related, yeah, I love it.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite comfort meal?
I'm a big soup person. I don't know that it's like I could eat soup in the middle of summer when it's like 40 degrees Celsius in Canada. And I'm literally like in a t-shirt and shorts being like, why is it so hot in here? And I'm eating a hot bowl of soup. But like soup and sandwiches, like, oh, and then like just donuts are my love language. So I think, yeah, I'm a big chewy carb person. It doesn't have to be a sweet carb. Like it doesn't have to be a donut, but like bread, probably the Greek in me, like I grew up eating so much bread. Anything that can have bread or like that chewiness, like stews, warmth, comfort. That's what I like.
So I am also a soup aficionado, so I feel that. So yeah, that's the end of my questions. Thank you so much for being here. If someone wants to find you, where will they look?
So I mean, if you just Google my first and last name, Melissa Boufounos, you'll find a ton of stuff. It'll connect you to my website. You'll connect to my Facebook page. But on Instagram, I'm at Melissa Boufounos. Facebook, I think, is just at Melissa Boufounos Performance Nutrition. But yeah, Google's probably the best bet, and you'll find a ton of stuff on there.
I will link a few of them in the comments of this.
Perfect.
Awesome. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me.